You are listening to CPA Career Path Podcast with Rosie Flaherty, CPA MSA. This is episode number 51. We continue the conversation with Calvin Harris Jr., CPA, the CEO of New York State Society of CPAs. This episode is proudly sponsored by Chapman University's Achiros College of Business and Economics, located in beautiful sunny Southern California. Are you thinking about pursuing a master's in accounting? Chapman's MSA program is tailored for ambitious professionals like you. With intimate class size and a collaborative atmosphere, you will receive personalized attention from world-class faculty who bring extensive industry expertise to the classroom. Enhance your accounting skills, fulfill CPA license requirements, and elevate your career with Chapman's flexible MSA program. Discover more and apply today at chapman.edu/MSA. And you mentioned that you work a lot of hours, do a lot of effort on this position at the New York State Society for CPAs. But you love this job. You love this job. So I just want to know what brought you to this position.
Well, I ended up here because of the job I had before this, or at least I know they were certainly connected. I came to New York to be the chief financial officer for the National Urban League, a historic civil rights organization. They did a national search, and I was fortunate enough to be chosen as a CFO. So that job as CFO was just, I didn't know it at the time, but it was just blocks away from where the society was at the time. And, you know, the Urban League's a fairly prominent organization, and being CFO makes it equally prominent. And I also had experience with NABA as a past national president, past national chair a while back. So I've been involved in the accounting profession for a while. So they had had a search process, and it came through. But I have no doubt, had I not already been in New York in a leadership role as CFO at the Urban League, I'm sure that played a huge part in me being identified.
So everything happens for a reason then.
It does. It does. That's a cliche, and I completely believe it to be true. Because I can think, but for me coming to New York, I probably would not be the CEO of New York. But for me, even having admittedly at the time a challenging time at the college, there was a lot of transition, so it wasn't necessarily, I wasn't sure I wanted to leave, but it wasn't necessarily as great a fit as it used to be. And then the Urban League was right there at the right time. I was like, oh, this might be interesting. And I will say this job here as CEO, much like the CFO job, and even much like the job before that, they were all jobs where my initial self-talk was, why would anybody want me in that job? Or I'm not qualified for the job. Neither of which were true. I'm absolutely qualified to be in the job. I was absolutely qualified to be in this job. But I had to ignore my own negative self-talk to take on the jobs. But I do think those things happen for a reason. I absolutely believe that anytime someone has been successful, and let's just say for the sake of discussion that I've done okay, I think there are always two things that come into play. And it may not always be equal, but there are always two. And it will be hard work and good fortune, whether it's good fortune, good luck, blessings, whatever way you prefer, but you didn't do anything and something good happened for you. Now, I will freely, I am not one of those people that believe, okay, you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I don't believe in that at all, because there are some people who don't even have boots. But I don't believe you can be successful without working hard. I've not found any lasting success that doesn't involve hard work. So no doubt, I've absolutely worked hard to be where I am. That said, there are also moments in my life where I was like, well, gosh, I didn't do anything to put myself in this position. That was just good fortune or blessings or whatever way you want to put it. Somebody was looking out for me, but it wasn't me. I also believe those are the case as well, to where, I am, I'm actually the first person of color to be the CEO of New York, only the second after Ralph Thomas in New Jersey to be in this role at all, which is a great honor, and it's a great responsibility. But I also know there were countless people before me that could be in this job. I'm just the one that was chosen, and that's great. But I strongly believe, I admit, and I'm probably rambling on this because it's also a sore spot. Oh, you just work hard. I said, no, sometimes you work hard and you still don't succeed. that happens. Right. Right. Sometimes you work hard and you still don't. There are some things that go beyond just working hard. But I do believe that it's those two things always come into play. If I borrow a phrase, I think I'm stealing it from Kimberly Ellison Taylor. I've heard her say many times that my steps were ordered. So I was like, okay, your steps were ordered, but you also have to work hard at the same time. So yeah, I believe they happen together.
I like it a lot about how you come up with hardworking and then good fortune.
Yep.
Because if you have good fortune and you're not hardworking, you don't have skills to do the job.
That's right.
And if you're hardworking and you don't have good fortune, it takes you longer to get where you want.
Bingo.
So absolutely true about that. Mm-hmm. And you have been in this job since 2022, right?
Yeah.
So I just want to know what has been your primary focus for this role.
Yeah, well, I love this question. There's a lot, so I'll say top of all that is overlying relevance of the profession. I think our relevancy is key. At a time where technology and AI have people asking, I think they're asking the wrong question, but I get why they're asking it, whether accounting is even going to exist from technology. My answer, absolutely. Will it change? Absolutely. Everything it will absolutely change, like technology has always changed, but it'll still exist. But I think relevancy is key. But I think it also means being relevant means you have to think beyond what you've always done. The cornerstone of an organization like mine are people in public accounting. And we will continue to support people in public accounting. We of course should. I began my career in public accounting. So I have a great affinity for public accounting. But there are also many people who are not, by our numbers, roughly a third to 25%, 1 quarter to 1/3 of my members are not in public accounting in some sort of way, whether it's a big, medium-sized, small firm, or middle. They're working elsewhere. So, I just saw how one of my members just became an executive of a sports team. Well, he got promoted, but he's still a CPA, but he's using that job at a completely different sort of industry. I've talked to people who are CFOs at hospitals. Of course, a hospital has CFO. So I think one of the things that's really important for organizations like ours is to make sure that people continue to see the value in the CPA. And part of that value is reminding people of what you can do beyond that. I talked, much earlier in our conversation on how when I got my first opportunity as CFO, a huge part of a huge difference there was that I had my CPA and my boss at the time did not. And that was very important to my supervisor at the time. So I think relevancy is key. So many of the things we have going on right now leans to that. We've done a very recent rebranding to where you can see, NYCPA is our thing. We've got a very famous building as part of our logo now. It's actually 1 block away, Empire State Building. We've launched our podcast of our own, where we're trying to tell really good stories on accountants that are doing interesting things. We focused on membership. So these are things we were already doing. I mean, the society's been in existence for well over 125 years. So in many cases, we're not looking to do anything new. And I'm sorry, anything different necessarily, but we are looking to continue the things that we're doing well, but find new ways of expanding. Because I think with so many CPAs doing things like technology and doing things in industries that are newer. Just recently, we had a member on our podcast that focuses on cannabis industry. One before that, another one that focuses overwhelmingly on digital assets. Well, those are areas that I didn't talk about at all when I came out of college. They barely existed as areas. So I think one of the things I see as really important is while I support the profession and while I try to move the profession forward, at least here in New York, to the extent I can, also help people of all ages see just how many things you can do as a CPA. Because I think it's very easy to forget that there are a lot of things that we can do. So relevancy is very high on my list.
You mentioned a very, very strong point about CPA license, that you got promoted to be a CFO at that time because you got a CPA license. However, at this time, as you know, that a lot of people, they can still be promoted if they have EA instead of CPA license.
Yeah.
Because CPA license, people say that it's so much time to study. It's so much work to put in to pass the CPA exam. But for EA, it's a lot easier. And you still can be promoted to manager, to director, and above with the EA.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is that, if that's the case, do people still need CPA license?
Now, that's a fair question. And I think it's going to vary by person and by industry. You know, the great thing about CPA, and the very few credentials that can say this, is that as a CPA, and sometimes right or wrong, admittedly, you are given the benefit of the doubt for your financial expertise in any number of areas. That would include taxation, would include auditing, would include general business. As a CPA, you're considered an expert in business, right or wrong. And there are very few credentials, with all due respect to all those other credentials, there are very few that can claim that breadth of confidence, that same breadth of credibility. Now, of course, if you know that you're going to focus on taxation, that's going to be that's your sweet spot. That is what you enjoy the most. Then sure, you can make a case that maybe you should choose this versus that, or depending on the area, if you're in IT, you may choose this versus that. Where I tend to recommend to people that if it doesn't have to be an either or choice. I'm sure I've talked to them, but I'm hard pressed to think of many people that I've heard who have regretted becoming a CPA because it didn't enhance their career. So I would say to anyone saying it, so well, find someone who can say that. I mean, I'm sure there's someone out there. Maybe they're not in accounting at all, heaven forbid. but the power and the credibility that the CPA credential has is really unmatched in the profession. There's a reason why, particularly in a state like New York, it is not uncommon for me to get letters and questions from people outside of the country saying they want to become a CPA. They don't have to be a CPA licensed. They don't have to be a U.S. licensed CPA or a New York licensed CPA. They can be a chartered accountant in their country. That people from all around the globe are constantly wanting to have this credential is telling. And the reason is because even for all the conversations we're having, including right now, in terms of how licensing should work and where the qualifications are, the credential itself is as strong as ever. And I think we need to remember that. We can't afford to rest on our laurels, by the way, but I can tell you from the questions I get and the comments I get all the time, I have no doubt that if I had someone, or I knew someone who was just starting their career in accounting, said, should I do this versus that? I said, well, don't choose. Do them both. I said, but I can guarantee, and I'm not one to use that word very often, I can guarantee you will not regret becoming a CPA, because the benefits that you will get over the course of your career, you probably don't even know what they are. I'm doing things now that weren't exposed to me when I was in college. Why? Because it evolves. It evolves over time. So you don't have to choose. It will take a lot of time. Good news, you only got to pass the test once. You only got to do it one time. It'll be tough, but you can do it. But it's absolutely worth it.
Yeah, it's worth it, especially when you go out to public and people know that you are a CPA. You can see the light in their eyes, in their face, like, oh, you are a CPA.
Absolutely.
I remember that because one time I went to this dentist appointment.
Yeah.
And then we talk about like, oh, when is the next appointment, and like about the routine and everything. And I said, oh, I'm so busy doing this time from February to April, and then September, August to October. And then he was like, oh, are you doing in tax? And I was like, yes. And oh, you are a CPA? And I said,
there we go.
Oh, wow. And he started talking about like all expenses in the office. And
Yep. Then it all changes.
It all changes. The reactions.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. So I tend to, you know, and I realize it's easy for me to say because I only have one credential, and that's CPA. But you know, the power of the credential is as strong as ever, and I certainly know more than a few people with credentials beyond CPA. But they keep listing CPA. They may be a PhD, but they still list CPA. They may be EA, but they still mention CPA. MBA, but they still mention CPA. Why? Because they know the same thing I'm saying here is that CPA credential, those three letters, are extraordinarily powerful in your career and absolutely within the profession.
It is very powerful. Absolutely agree with you about that. Cannot deny anything about how powerful those three letters CPA are after your name.
Yeah, well, you see, I don't know if the listeners will see it, but it is intentional that even on my thing, I would often put, as it is right now, Calvin Harris Jr. CPA. So it's like it is a badge of honor that I've earned, and I'm very proud to be a CPA.
And we are very proud to have you in our profession.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you. And I want to share with our audience that the reason why I reached out to Calvin because I saw his LinkedIn post.
Yeah.
And I love his post. He posts a lot of amazing information, a lot of his activities. Like, I know, are you running marathon?
I am. I'm training for the New York City Marathon November the 3rd. So I'm a little more than a month away. Yep.
Wow. Yeah. And then I saw you post about running, about like when you attend a conference.
Yeah.
I watched and I read them all. So
yeah.
All those posts are amazing. So
Thank you.
I believe that New York State Society, they are lucky to have you in this position.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Rosie. I feel very fortunate and honored to be here in New York. New Yorkers are a lively bunch, but I can't imagine doing this work anywhere else. It's a fantastic place to be.
But you are not from New York, right?
No, I'm a Marylander. I've been here in New York for 5 years, which so I'm very familiar. I know my way around the state quite well at this point. But it's funny. So I will say I grew up just outside of Washington D.C., which obviously is a pretty big city. But pretty much anywhere else in the country pales in comparison to just the the scale of New York City. But it's there's the phrase if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. It probably does track because it's really a great place to be, though.
I still remember I visited New York twice, and both times I had the same issue is that my neck hurt so much because I have to look up.
Now here's a side note, and one of the best ways to tell that someone is not from New York, or at least hasn't been here very long, is looking up, because it's true. New Yorkers do not look up. That never happens. So anytime somebody something is they're not from around here. Other than you look up and you actually wait for crosswalks, which by the way is not what you're supposed to do in traffic. I realize, but New Yorkers tend to be a little flexible on that particular point. So
mention about cross the street. I just moved from California to Massachusetts, and then my husband took me to Boston, and we were at the stoplight, and then I was standing there waiting for all the cars to stop, and so I can cross the street, and then all people just walking by.
Yeah.
And I went like, no, people just don't stop.
Yeah. Oh, that's absolutely New York. So we'll say it. So my New York colleagues will probably cringe when I say this, but this is a place where New York and Boston are apparently in alignment. But yeah, no, it's not appropriate. So I'm not at all suggesting that you just walk in the middle of the street. But what tends to happen here is that you cross when you think you can make it. So let the light be whatever the light is.
Wow, it's not too risky. You told me that don't take you are taking risk every day.
Yeah, well, look, I'm guilty of it. I've actually, I probably did it earlier today, but you know, that's New York.
Well, you have to follow with where you live with. You cannot to be able to be a part of the community, right? Otherwise, you cannot.
Very true.
Yeah,
Very true.
it is what it is. Yeah.
Yes.
And as you know that CPAs, we are doing a lot for CPA exams, for the application process, for the salary discussion, and for the technology. So a lot and above and beyond, a lot of discussions we're talking about how to evolve this profession. And on the beside of you mentioned about being relevant and a lot of things you are working on the New York State Society. What do you think about this accounting or this CPA profession in the future of being with all the, I would say, all the distractions around or all the supports around?
Yeah. I think we're in a very interesting time. And I don't think anyone truly knows where everything is landing. I've even this week had called the time we're in a bit of a generational time where we have a lot of leaders in major roles who are relatively new. I've been in this role for about 2.5 years, but I am by no means the newest state society CEO. There are quite a few others who started after me. We have big changes happening at organizations like NASBA and AICPA and other places. We have conversations happening around the country in terms of where, what licensing might mean in the future. So we're in a really interesting time where it is as important as ever for CPAs, whether you're a new CPA or a more seasoned CPA, to make sure that you're involved and active and making your voice known in terms of where you think the profession should be. I gotta admit, I still think that there's no better time to be in the profession than right now. For all the things that are going on, there are a lot of challenges you can point out, rightfully so. But at the same time, when I think about even the start of my career, things that I did at Arthur Andersen, experience I loved. But there are things I did there that you wouldn't have anyone do anymore. Why? Because technology makes those things unnecessary. Some things I did in terms of, what we call ticking and tying, in terms of making sure things added up, arithmetically. I think that's how you say it, that the numbers match. You don't do that anymore.
No, we don't. I remember I did that when I was an auditor. You have to fold
exactly,
and then to make sure that the number add up correctly. Yes.
Right. But it's a better time. It's a better time than ever. I think what's important these days is for people to definitely make sure they're paying attention. There's a lot of information out there. Make sure that your voice is heard in terms of things that are going on, and be engaged. Ideally be engaged with a state society like New York, but if not here, be engaged in some way, because where the profession goes will be very much dependent upon those of us who make sure our voices are heard. So, and I don't say this in an alarmist way. I see this as a good thing. I think it's important. It's good to have as many voices as possible to help us decide what the profession should be. One of the things I think is critical, and part of why I'm so excited to chat with you as well, is to make sure that we have as many voices of different ages and different backgrounds and engaged. I jokingly say we need more people engaged who did not take the CPA exam on paper. I took the exam on paper in a very, very big room We need to have more people engaged, and I'm not saying to push people off to the side like me. I'm not necessarily saying that, but we do need more people who know the experience of how it is to take it now. You're even if you've only been a CPA for 1 year or less than a year, if you're sure, your voice is just as critical as someone like me who's been a CPA for 27 years. Your voice is just as critical. Why? Because you're probably going to have more years in the profession than I will. So your voice is critical right now. So I think this is a time where engagement is key. Not because it's a bad time for the profession. No, I believe it's a great time for the profession. But that engagement will help make sure that it stays a great time for the profession.
I like how you said that voice heard, that we need to bring more people in to speak up. But
yes.
One thing I found is difficult is that if you are just an intern, if you are just a staff, and you feel like, I'm just a beginner, I don't have strong voice, and if I speak up, what if it affects my career?
Yeah, no, that's a reality. Now, I get that. It's very easy for me as the CEO of New York to say something like that, knowing that I'm clearly in a leadership role. But oftentimes, one thing I didn't realize early in my career, and someone told me this, I just didn't believe them. They were right, that you can lead without a title. You absolutely can be a voice in the profession and make sure that your voice is heard without that. Technology, I mean, various parts of social media make it possible. There are countless people that I've had an opportunity to engage with just because of, we're talking. You talked about my LinkedIn, for example, but there are opportunities to still make yourself known. And I realize there are cases where, depending on the job you have, you might be a little reluctant, but that's where you can have the opportunity to be engaged with other organizations that you can make sure your voice is also heard through here. State Society is one of those great places. It may sound self-serving, but that doesn't mean I'm wrong. So it's hard to think that way. I know when you're early in your career, particularly if it's in a tough situation, it's like, oh gosh, I'm not even sure I'm enjoying this anymore. I can assure you, as someone that's had great jobs, great jobs, and admittedly not so great jobs, that you still can find a benefit and still can find a use in the profession.
I agree with you about that, because you can think, if you think about your career is just like a journey, every single step in your journey is count. So it doesn't matter that the beginning, middle, or the end is count. Absolutely. As long as you share the thoughts. Because a lot of times you and me, and we have different ideas, and people who just join the organization, join the profession, they have fresh minds. And they may bring up the ideas that you and I would never thought about. So,
yeah, no, I got to tell you, particularly to the person, if someone's listening or seeing and is thinking that thing no one wants to hear from me, I got to tell you, I'm one of those leaders, and most of the leaders I know fall into the same bucket. We don't always articulate it very well, and that's true. But I end up, the things that I worry about the most are often the unknown unknowns. There are things I know, okay, this is a problem, but at least I know it's a problem. And then there are things that I don't know, but I might be able to figure it out. But then there are things that are just complete blind spots. And those worry me. I admittedly worry that there are people newer in the profession or just in school now. Part of the reason I enjoy talking to students so much is not just because I enjoy the college experience, maybe because of all the years I spent working in it, is that they're the future of the profession. And I very much want to hear what they're experiencing right now. Because in some cases, I happen to be in a role where I can help influence what they're going to experience. Not always, but I can guarantee if I don't know, I can't do anything about it. So it's one of those things, as tough as it might be, and heck, even as scary as it might be, there are leaders here. There are people who, in many cases, are in a position to assist or at least make sure that voice gets amplified, but we don't know. And you might say, well, why don't you know? You should know this. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how easy it is to miss something that might even be obvious. So if you're thinking about putting your voice out there, do it. If you're thinking about, I say this to students all the time, because I know when they want to reach out, I say, if you're thinking about reaching out to me, go ahead and do it. I said, don't think too hard. Just go ahead and do it. I might not be the fastest in getting back, and I'm working on being a little more responsive in that regard. I said, and I realize it can be very scary to reach out to someone in a position like mine, particularly if they're much older than you are. But more often than not, we actually want to hear from you. I know I do. I want to hear that feedback. I want to hear what we're doing well, and I want to hear what we can do better.
Yeah, talking about responding, when I saw your email, I was very impressed. Your last paragraph in your email.
Oh, yeah.
Let me just read it out loud real quick. I have it right here. Yeah. So you say that I'm sending this message now as this time is convenient for me, but I do not expect a reply outside of your working hours. I really like it. And you mentioned that I appreciate your time. And if you receive this after hours, please feel free to respond during your next work day. I like it a lot. I was like, I'm telling you that when I saw your email and I saw this paragraph, I read this paragraph like multiple times.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Rosie. I can't claim credit for it. And if I could remember exactly who I borrowed that from, I'd give them credit. But I had seen that from someone else. And, I got to admit, in this job as CEO, it's not a 9-to-5 job. It's not even close to a 9-to-5 job. So it may look like it sometimes. No, it is not even close to a 9-to-5 job. And there are times where the best time for me to respond to things is, right after dinner, or, I might kind of sort of be watching the television. I'm really replying, and I find it that way. But one thing I found, and I found this out, I realized this happened early on, and it probably happened more than and then I realized, and I wish I had realized it earlier. I would send a response to a staff person, and the reason I would send it is I was afraid if I didn't send it now, I would forget to send it. So I'm going to hit send. Well, I hit send, and then 10 minutes later, they've responded. I was like, well, gosh. I don't expect you to respond to me at 10 o'clock at night. That's ridiculous. This isn't an emergency. I'm getting my thoughts out there. So I put that on there. And then for some people, if they still respond after hours, I'll even say it. So you know what? I appreciate the response. You didn't need to respond now. I said, I don't want to forget. Now, I've since realized that, and this is, of course, basic, but I wasn't doing it, that I could have always just scheduled my messages. So one of the things my people know, any message that arrives at 8 o'clock in the morning, I did not send at 8 o'clock in the morning. I probably sent the night before. I just didn't want it to go through so that you would feel compelled to respond. But I do think it's important. I think it's important as a leader, and frankly, just as a human being, to respect everyone's time. And in my mind, being CEO is not a 9-to-5 job, but that's the job I accepted. That's the job I enjoy. That's the job I love. But I think it's a little unreasonable for someone in my role to expect a person in a different role in the organization to be checking email. That's just not fair. They deserve to have a life. I deserve to have a life too, but I choose to reply to them. So I put that in there, and I hope it's been effective, because fewer and fewer people respond after hours.
So it's working. That's good. That's awesome.
Yeah.
You mentioned about deserve to have a life. So
Yes.
I understand that it's about work-life balance.
Sure.
And you just mentioned to me that being this job, you not just a 9-to-5 job. You also prepare for marathon in November, and also work so many hours.
Right.
How do you balance yourself with all of this work?
Yeah, this is a great point. And I got to admit, I generally avoid using work-life balance as much as work-life integration, which aren't too far off. But I feel like if you think about balance like an old scale manual side, it's rarely this way. More often than not, it's kind of like a seesaw, to where it's sometimes a little more work, sometimes a little more of this, a little bit. So I try to make it all fit. Now, critical to this is being in a job that does connect to you, personally, like we talked about a little earlier. And then I just find a way to make it work. I'd love to say there's a secret to it, but there really isn't. Sometimes it's tough. Sometimes I get up to run a little earlier than I can. But I had just recently listened to a podcast on another on another platform where the person talked about how she thought that she was a better CFO because she was running triathlons, and that quote of hers really resonated for me. Now, I don't run triathlons or do triathlons. I don't see that in my future, but you never know. I wouldn't have said I would do marathons 5 years ago. But it's true. I do find the running to be very relaxing, believe it or not. I find it to be a good challenge. It's great for me physically, but I do believe it helps make me a better leader because it forces me to decompress. There are I'm not going to say that running a marathon is dangerous, but there are a lot of ways you can injure yourself. Some of which, if you're not just paying attention. I wasn't paying attention just 2 days ago when I was crossing the street and I tweaked my ankle. Nothing serious. It'll be fine. But it was just a reminder when that happens that, oh yeah, you gotta pay attention. You have to be mindful, even if you're doing something like this. So I find that it's tough to make it all work. But it's I'm not sure I'd have it any other way because I enjoy it all so much that I just try to find a way to make it all integrated.
I like how you compare running or like just like cross the street related to work because I have an experience that I was like, this makes sense when I deal with staff because my husband, he loves working on house projects. So he asked me to go to Home Depot to get this small, tiny tool. It's like the size of my thumb. That's it.
Yeah.
And he's like, you will go to this section at Home Depot and then bought this for me. It's probably about $5-7 and that's it. And home. And he's working on fixing on the house. So I was like, okay, I can do that. I left the house at 11 a.m. I didn't go back until 2 p.m.
Oh, hard to find.
I couldn't find it. First, I went to wrong location. And then I went to Home Depot and then I was walk around. I went to the wrong section in Home Depot. And then when I went to the right section in Home Depot, I had no idea what I was looking for.
Right. I get it.
The next day, I went to grocery. I goes to grocery every day. So I went grocery. Within 1 hour, I got full of my car. A lot of things. It's still just one tiny small thing that my husband asked me. So I was like, that makes sense for staff. When you work with staff, they know what they're doing. They will do things a lot faster. When you give new job to the staff that he or she has never done that in the past, of course, it takes longer. It just feels so dumb that I spent 3 hours just find a very small, tiny tool in Home Depot.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and I'm willing to bet that if the situation were reversed and your husband, the one that went to Home Depot, he would have probably been back immediately because he knew exactly what he was looking for, and he probably had a feel. I myself have had more than one experience in Home Depot or a store like that where I was like, I just cannot figure this out. And I'm like, this can't be that complicated, but it's complicated for me. I don't have the knowledge. So having that background knowledge really makes a difference.
It makes a difference. And also, we talk a lot about your career and you have achieving so many things in your career so far. I'm just curious, what are you looking forward in the next stage in your career?
Wow. It's, well, I gotta admit, considering how life has had so many twists and turns for me, I do think long term, but I tend to think of it with some degree of flexibility. It might sound a little corny, but I think I'm really in the job now. I can't imagine doing something else. I mean, I'm sure there are other great things out there, but I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I feel like I'm making a difference. I love accounting. So it's like, well, gosh, how can you beat this? I mean, I love accounting and I'm in charge of the accounting organization in the biggest city in the country. You can't beat this. So it's admittedly hard to think beyond that. So I think as much as anything, expanding what we're doing here in New York. I mean, New York is obviously big, but expanding even more, and improving and increasing how people think about the profession. I feel very strongly about that. I mean, part of the reason I feel so strongly about it is that I believe that accounting and being a CPA has given me a lot. I've worked hard for it. We talked about that part earlier, but it's really given me a lot. So you only get so many times in your life to where you can really give back to something or someone that gave so much to you. And I feel like I'm in that space right now. So I'm just really grateful to be doing what I'm doing. And so much of my short, medium, and long-term focus is on doing what I'm doing here to the best of my ability. And it's a great place to be.
Thank you for saying that, because I feel that this profession is very, very lucky that we have you in this profession to promote this profession to college students, to high school students, and for the future generation as well.
Thank you. Same to you, obviously, Rosie. You're doing amazing work for us as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We talk a lot of accounting profession. How about we say something fun before we close this podcast?
Okay.
That I know you absolutely love accounting, and I know you love music too. If you can choose another career, not accounting, not music, not saxophone, which one you going to choose?
I actually have a pretty easy answer for this. It would absolutely be a bartender. Absolutely be a bartender. So I and I mean, I'll probably caveat in a rather quiet and small place. So I enjoy a good, well-made drink, but I even more so, I really enjoy making them. So whenever I've had the opportunity to have at conferences or whatnot, a hospitality suite or a place where people, I love just the thought of serving people something that they enjoy and getting creative there. So if I were to do anything just for fun, I'd probably be one of those people. And there are lots of places like that here in New York, in one of those very small, quaint sort of lounges where you've got this person making drinks at very high end. So that would probably be me. I would love what I'm doing. I'd spend most of the time making creative concoctions and talking to people, asking about their lives and their day. That would probably be me. I'd probably be a bartender.
Wow, I could see that. I'm not the one who drinks alcohol, but I would love to try one day if I can see you in New York. Why not?
Well, look, I will say this. I absolutely know, to that point, I absolutely know how to make creative drinks that do not have alcohol.
Oh, that's good.
The way I see it, a great bartender should be able to do things with or without spirits. So I'm not saying that I'm a great bartender, by the way, but I absolutely can make some tasty drinks that have no alcohol in them whatsoever. So it doesn't have to have alcohol in it for it to be fun.
I remember that. And if you can say one fun fact about yourself that no one ever knows about that you haven't mentioned in this podcast.
Wow, now I'm stuck. I gotta admit, because for better or worse, I end up being pretty transparent about stuff. Even to the bartender one, that was new. Let's see. Fun fact. I need to pick it up again. I had been learning how to swim. I had to interrupt it. I can float, but I can't swim very well. But I was learning how to swim, and admittedly was toying with the idea of doing a triathlon, but only if I learned how to swim better. So that's one fun fact. I'm not saying I'm doing triathlons, by the way, but
no, you're doing marathon now.
Yeah, so life has twists and turns. You never know.
Yes, exactly. So we know a lot of fun side from you as well, and we're going to close this podcast. I know that you receive a lot of awards and recognition in this profession. And you also contribute a lot of volunteering time and hours for this profession as well. If you can provide some key advice to young generation, what could they be?
Yeah, my advice to the young generation is very simple: do it. When in doubt, do it. You don't want to be reckless, but so often good fortune, good luck will come to the person who just gives it a try. I have talked about a few of them in my own career, including cases where I had to be talked into it, admittedly. But so many of the greatest opportunities, personally and professionally, in my life have just come from doing it, from just trying it. Because more often than not, the stakes won't be life or death. They may feel very stressful. They may feel very challenging. You may feel very nervous, but maybe it'll work out. Maybe it'll turn out for the best. So when in doubt, just go ahead and do it. Give it a shot. It'll probably work out.
Thank you so much, Calvin, and I appreciate all your time and all your tips and advice during the podcast today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rosie. So glad to be here with you.